Download it. The Midnight Runner Podcast. The Midnight Runner Podcast.
Free love, come and save me. Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to the Midnight Runner Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Biddity Bob from the ESL Cafe, and he's going to talk about public school life as well as the transition to universities. We're kind of sitting out here on the patio having a few liquid drinks. So we're going to talk about public school life and university life as well. First of all, how long did you teach at a public school in Korea?
I taught at a public school for 2 years.
2 years. Okay, so when you were there, what did you do exactly? Were you like a full-time teacher, part-time teacher? What happened?
I was with SMOE, the Seoul Metropolitan Office of Education. We refer to ourselves as NSETs, a native-speaking English teacher. I was stationed at a middle school, and later I also did work at some other schools, mainly some high school work on the side.
Did you like high school or middle school better?
Well, I taught after school at high schools, so the students were more motivated and their levels were higher. And I taught in the States at a university, so I wanted to teach higher level students. So I liked the high school more, but the students were also motivated and they wanted to be there. The middle school was great, lots of fun. I was at a very good school. But if I had to choose, I'd go back to a high school.
Yeah, me too. I taught at a high school. We can get back into that later, but let's talk about you. Tell me about your qualifications. You said you taught at a school in the United States, right?
I did, actually. I started teaching, aside from management experience in the States, I worked in some political campaigns, teaching people how to canvass, teaching people how to talk with politicians, with citizens, with organizations. But then I went to graduate school. I have a master's in communication, and while I was in graduate school, I was teaching Introduction to Communication courses, communication theory, also public speaking.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a lot of people, like we say, back home in Canada, the United States, Australia, wherever, and they're thinking about coming to Korea. Would you advise them on what they should do? What's the best type of thing they should look for? Should they look for a hagwon? Should they look for a public school, university? What?
Really, you have to start with that individual person. What qualifications do they have? Because if they get a major in engineering, they can make, a lot of money, good money in the USA or whatever country they're from. But they may be only qualified at first for a hagwon. Public schools might hire them. It seems like SMOE is kind of iffy. Some people get in with a bachelor's in what have you that's not English or education related. Some people do get in, some don't. When you have an individual, people from the States, I know people personally who are thinking about coming, and I just have to say, what have you done in the States with education or experience, and really judge it from there. To have someone who wants to come to Korea, obviously most people do want to be in a public school over a hagwon. Not everybody, but most people. And I tell them, if they don't have a degree in English or in education, start tutoring people, start working, even volunteering. Put that on your resume so you can say, I have worked with people learning English as a second language.
Mm-hmm. So people who have a major in English or teaching or have an actual certification in teaching, can they make a fair amount more money here in Korea than they can compared to someone who doesn't have a degree in teaching?
Yes, I can. Let's start that question over. I'm sorry. The cat is...
We have a cat crawling up the screen here. That's great. That's all right. This is kind of funny. He's like hanging off the screen here. Wow. All right. Put it back in the house. Okay. No problem.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. We'll start that question again. That actually might be kind of fun to keep in there.
Yeah.
So
we'll play it later.
So if someone has a degree in something like English or actually has teaching certifications, can they make more money at a public school or a hagwon compared to someone who does not?
Yes, they can. At least in SMOE and also GEPIC and EPIC, they have pay scales, and they're very rigorous about sticking to these. They will make more money in the public schools than someone who does not have that degree. The more experience or more education in this field, they will make more money.
For newbies who don't really know the numbers here, what are the pay scales for SMOE or GEPIC?
Well, you can find those online, but off the top of my head, the base entry is I think around 2 million won for someone starting that has a degree, say, in art and no other experience than that. They'll start at about 2 million. With a master's degree, when I started, I was making 2.3 million, but I had some teaching experience as well. And the next year, I was raised up 100,000 won just for completing another year. After I got my TEFL, which was after I came to Korea, that bumped me up to another 100,000 a month. And
when you say a TEFL certification, you're talking about a TEFL certification over 100 hours, and it will give you a bump of somewhere between what, $100 or $200 a month?
Yes, yeah, that's right. 100 is standard, but someone who is at the 2 million won, many people who get that 100-hour or more TEFL certificate, even if it is an online one, that often bumps them up to 200,000 won a month.
And one thing I've learned through the interviews, and people can see this on my previous interviews, I know the F59 interview, which was done earlier this past week, we were discussing how people who get that certification, depending on what level they're at, they may or may not get the pay bump. So that's interesting to note as well. Someone with a master's degree might not qualify for that because they're already making the maximum. So it's something worthy to check into as well. Okay, so let's talk some more, though, about the transition to university. You worked in the public school. You enjoyed your public school job. I know that from talking to you before. And you thought maybe it was a logical progression to move on to a university, I'm assuming.
It definitely was for me. I had university teaching experience before, and teaching public speaking is very different than teaching ESL or EFL. I like working with the older students. I like having more of a conversation. Other people might not. My mother, for example, would hate it. She was a public school teacher in the States for over 30 years. She loved elementary school kids, never wanted to do more. But, what's your cup of tea? I personally wanted to work with those upper-level students to have more engaging conversations, to work with people who could already speak a certain level of English and improving their delivery and also their writing skills.
When you went on to the university level, did you find a difference in pay? In my own experience, I left a private high school and I came to a university, and my pay was actually less at the university. However, the trade-off was that I teach fewer hours and I have a lot more vacation. How about you?
I have a similar experience. With the public schools, I had an apartment paid for. And with the university, you just get a salary. If you work the minimum number of hours, then you will, or at least I will, make less than I would at the public school when you factor in not only the housing, but also the plane ticket. My university does not provide plane tickets. However, there are opportunities for overtime in the semester. You can usually get overtime that is based on seniority. If someone who's been there for 3 years wants it before I do, they're going to get it. But I'm going to get some overtime. And in the vacations, I do have long vacations, but they like me to work in those vacations to do like intensive English programs. It is my choice, but they pay very, very well. Most people work them during one of the vacations, summer or winter, or both.
When you say they pay well, you mean overtime pay in addition to your base salary?
That's right. You can double, triple. Some people who really go gung-ho could quadruple their monthly salary in a matter of 5 or 6 weeks.
I might change universities there. That's pretty good. Quadruple. When I worked at the private high school before, and I'll be honest about this because, of course, I didn't do anything like this, but there were a lot of what I call built-in privates at at that high school. A lot of teachers needed someone to teach their kids, and of course my coworkers taught those kids. Do you find that the pay level at what you were making at the high school was quite a bit higher or any different than at the university
The overtime rates, it depends. In my regular school, when I was in public schools, the middle schools, SMOE pays a minimum of 20,000 won an hour. And that's whether it's during the school day and you're going over your contractual hours, or whether it's after school. My school, paid a little bit more. Not much more. The high school, however, because I was not the regular teacher, did pay me more. Sometimes at the university courses, I get paid about the same as what I'd make teaching overtime at a high school. But if it's like a credit class, or especially if it's a totally different course than I'm teaching now, they know I have a lot more planning, because I can't take the same class and just teach one extra section of that. I have to actually plan, for example, a debate course. I don't usually teach debate, but if I do teach debate, there is a lot more planning that goes into it. It's more work for me. They'll pay me more than a high school or middle school ever would.
Well, let's try to get in some numbers here, and if you're not comfortable with getting into that, I totally understand. Comparison-wise, what could you make in a public school compared to a university in a typical month during the school year?
Well, someone who has been here, like I have for a couple of years, with a master's, with previous teaching experience, with TEFL certification, you can make 2.4, 2.5 million a month. Add to that your housing allowance, or your apartment is simply paid for. Add to that your plane tickets once a year to go home or whatever country you want to go to. I would make per month, just with housing and salary, anywhere from 3 to 3.2 million. That is on the high end. Most people are going to be looking at around 2.8 or so. With the university, it really depends. If you look on, say, ESL Cafe or other job websites, some universities are starting people with a master's at 2 million won a month with no housing.
Or 1.8 even outside in the sticks.
Yes. At other universities, they will pay more. They'll pay 2.7, 2.8 a month, just the bare minimum number of teaching hours. You don't get the housing allowance. You don't get the airfare. But as I mentioned during the vacations, if you swap your vacation for working, and oftentimes it's working 2 or 3 times more than you would during the regular semester, you can make a lot of money, and that will cover your apartment, and that will cover your plane tickets.
You're at a large university, and I'm not going to say which one. Do you find, as a newbie at the university, that you have some difficulty getting those extra hours over the people who have been at the university for quite some time?
For the classes that pay a lot more, for example, debate courses, I can't get those right now. I'm the rookie. But after the first or second semester, they become more available. The lower paying ones, for example, conversation classes, those are easier to come by.
Well, let's talk about that vacation time a little bit more. When you were working at the public school, how many weeks of vacation did you get per year?
SMOE in the contract gives you 21 business days. This is in addition to, of course, national holidays and random school holidays like the school birthday. But yes, 21 business days. There are a few opportunities for more. If you re-sign with SMOE, you'll get 14 calendar days. It's a strange contractual wording. 14 calendar days of vacation. If you teach at a summer or winter camp away from your district, say it's a sleep away at a university in another city, you get 5 extra days. However, those 5 extra days are often because you're sleeping at the university, and Saturday and Sunday you're still at the university, so you don't have the 2 or 3 weekends off, so they just grant you extra vacation to make up for that.
So a lot of people are sitting there at public schools right now, and maybe they have some qualifications or maybe not, and they're curious. Is it important, or is it worthwhile for them to think about making that jump to a university? What do you think? Is it better to stay at the public school? Should they try for a university? Overall, what has been your experience so far? And I know you've only been here at this school a few months, but what's your advice for people like that who are thinking about making that jump?
You've really got to take it on a case-by-case basis. You've got to look at your school. You've got to look at the bigger organization, whether it's SMOE, GEPIC, or EPIC. How is your school and how is this organization treating you? How much money are you making? And you've got to look at the universities. As I mentioned, some universities are starting at 1.8 with a master's. I would have not traded that. My first year in public schools, a lot of my friends at universities said, you are qualified to work at a university. I was comfortable in the public school. I had a great time. I was very lucky. I had great co-teachers, principals, great relationship with all the school staff and the students. It was easy for me to stay. I still wouldn't have traded it. If I could have gone back and only done 1 year in a public school, I wouldn't have changed it. I'm happy that I did too. But you really have to look at which universities can you get in, how are they run. It's not only about pay. Do you have academic freedom in the classroom? Are you respected? Or are you just a workhorse where they require you to teach university courses, but also at a uniguan, at kind of a hagwon run by the university? Even some prestigious universities require you, or not require, but it's pretty much required. It's not in the contract, but if you don't do it, they may not want to rehire you. They'll require you to teach in the evenings at, kind of a hagwon on campus. How much are they paying you? How is it run? You really have to talk to the foreign teachers working there and balance each of those things: pay, hours, vacation, staff, academic freedom, and student attitudes.
And that's almost a whole nother podcast talking about uniguans, but let's touch on that because my job at my university is technically a uniguan job. I'm not hired by the English department. I'm hired by a separate department, which is part of that university. And I teach students who are taking actual full credit university classes, but also some of my classes are what we would call uniguan classes. And uniguan means university hagwon. And they're non-credit classes. I teach about 6 credits worth of non-credit classes a semester. The rest are full credit classes. But I'm not technically an English department member. And those uniguans really vary from school to school based on how good they are. Based on pay, based on what number of hours they're going to ask you to work, etc. This is all just kind of for the newbies here who are kind of curious about Korea. And my school, actually being a part of the uniguan, is almost identical to being a part of the English department. There's really no difference. However, at some schools, and I know some larger schools in Seoul, there's quite a huge difference between if you have a uniguan job and an actual English department job. So it's very important for you as a new person coming to Korea or as a new person going to a university job to find out what that job entails. What students are you going to be teaching? Because there's a huge level of difference between the motivation of the students. If they're taking a uniguan class, sometimes they aren't that interested in studying that hard. Sometimes they're very interested in working very hard if they're in, obviously, a graded class. Now let's talk about your school. How many hours of what we would call uniguan classes compared to regular classes are you teaching?
We don't really have a uniguan. We do have extra conversational non-credit courses that you can or cannot teach. It's your choice. Once you sign up for those, you're expected to do them for the rest of the semester. But personally, I teach the regular university courses and the conversation classes and possibly some other credit courses, going back to debate as a good example. Touching on uniguans, there are a lot of people who say, I want to get a university job. They're hired by a university and they find out it is a uniguan. A lot of universities who run these only give, maybe the 3 or 4 weeks of vacation a year. And it looks good on the surface. Oh, it's a university. People think universities get 4 months of vacation. a lot of them don't. Even if you are in the university, it's written in the contract, you must teach during the summer, you must teach during the winter. I know a guy from the USA right now who's thinking about coming over to Korea. He got a contract through a university. I put that in quotations. And he sent me his contract and information, and I said, "You're not really teaching for a university. You're teaching at a Hagwon at the university." He says, "Oh, I know I'm not getting the vacation like I read about these, grand university jobs that give you 4 months." And he really has to look at that and say, is that what he wants to do? Because honestly, he will probably make more money at a Hagwon, teaching similar hours, having a little bit less vacation. But in the end, it really comes down to what does he want to do.
And that's something that's changed over the last 5 to 10 years, as I understand it, in Korea. I've been in Korea for over 6 years, and I've seen quite a few changes, but I know some people have been here quite a bit longer, and they've seen more. Years ago, getting a university job was considered the top job you could get because of the vacation, the pay, etc. But what we've seen happening over the last few years are the pay has gone down at the universities or stayed the same, while pay at public schools, actually the public school jobs are sort of new in the past 2 or 3 years. Those have come up, the pay has come up, and people have found that actually staying at a public school job might be a better deal for them. So it really pays for you to look into that and really see, what kind of contract am I getting into? And the contract is really, really important because that really is the bottom line as far as what you're going to be paid and how many hours you're going to be working, because schools can promise anything they want. But the truth is, unless it's in the contract that you actually sign, you may not get that. And I've personally found out that you can be lied to straight to your face. So it's very good to get into a solid contract and sign a contract that actually states how many hours you're working, what your pay is going to be for those hours, what your overtime hours are, and you've got to really fight sometimes. And this varies from school to school. Some schools are good, some schools are not. But you've really got to fight to keep to that contract, etc.
And you also really have to talk to those foreign teachers that are already there, because you may have a great contract and maybe one thing says you have to attend departmental meetings, and what you find out later is these departmental meetings are a pain in the neck. And you are they're looking at everything you do. They're asking you all these questions. They may not like what you're doing. It really depends on how the university is run. How do they treat their foreign teachers? Some universities, those professors and administrators don't respect the university teachers. Doesn't matter if they have a master's or how long they've been teaching EFL, or even in the USA. Other universities are great, and you have to do your research, because just because it says university, or even if the contract looks good, you could be getting into a pit of fire, and you definitely need to do your research.
And one thing to look at the university level is how long have the teachers been there, because a teacher can tell you whatever they want. At the Hagwon level, a teacher can tell you, "Oh, this school's it's good, it's fine, whatever, don't worry about it." But I've found from personal experience and through the experience of many friends over the years, the experiences they've had, sometimes they have to lie their way just to get out of a contract and get a letter of release at the Hagwon level. Now, universities are a little different. You can tell if a teacher has been there a long time, if teachers have stayed there a long time. That's a good indication that it's a good school or that they're happy to stay there. If there are a lot of teachers who have gone in and out of there after 1 year of teaching, then you might want to consider, hey, maybe this isn't a place that I want to go.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And to also touch on that, public schools, at least SMOE, they will not give you a letter of release. They will refuse. It doesn't matter what situation you're in. I've never talked to anyone.
You're talking about if you break a contract, right?
I'm talking about if you want to break a contract, or even if you say, hey, I finished a year. I want to do 6 months more, and that's it. Would you give me 6 months more? No, it's 1 year, and if you quit at that 6 months, do not expect a letter of release from SMOE.
And if you don't get a letter of release, what happens?
Well, actually, with the visa law changes, I'm not quite sure, but I'm pretty sure that you can't go switch over your E2 visa if that's what you're on.
Yeah, you just have to go home, basically.
Yeah, you have to go home or, stay here illegally. Now, and then you have to let your contract expire, let that visa expire, then you can come back and get a different job. With a letter of release, you can go change employers. Or at the end of the contract, you don't need a letter of release, but at the end of the contract, if you're here in the country, you can get your place of employment switched and your visa extended, and SMOE will do that for you. But if you want to quit early, they will not. If you're on a different visa, like an F-Series visa, then you're in an easier situation. You can quit and you can get a different job, but that's not the public school's decision. That's the visa law and the visa rule.
Okay, great. Well, I hope we can talk again sometime more about SMOE and about your experiences with your public school job before and co-teaching as well. I really want to get into that topic. I'm trying to line up some Korean teachers who can speak from the Korean side about that. But this topic today has been pretty much about the transition to universities, so we'll have to save that for another time.
I'd like to add something, too. A lot of people say you can only get a university job through personal contacts and through networking. That's true a lot of the time, even the majority of the time. However, it's not true. I interviewed with other universities based on ads that they put through their university website or through websites like ESLcafe.com. You can get university jobs if you look for them online, but the best way to do it is to know somebody, and it's not a casual, hey, I met a guy on the street. People need to know you at a good university. They need to know you're a good teacher and that you're a trustworthy person. My suggestion would be to start either hanging out with those people, get into clubs, get into like extracurricular things around Seoul or whatever city you're in Korea, and meet those people. And let them know you're a good person, talk about your qualifications, and then when a job opening comes up in a good university, there may be one or two a semester, and they're not putting out an ad. They're asking their foreign teachers, who is someone you know that would be a good teacher here? And that's a great way to get a good university job. But once again, it's not always necessary. You can find them online or through university websites.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times you have to start near the bottom, which is a school outside of Seoul that's maybe paying 1.8 or 2.0. Or sometimes you get lucky. I was able to get in at my school with a BA and my previous experience. And I guess I impressed them during the job interview and my little test class I had to give them, which was fine. And it worked out great for me. I got lucky. But it's very true. Who you know really is a big influence on where you're going to work or where you might be able to get a job.
I have one more thing to say. I've got some friends, very well qualified. They could get a university job in Korea if they are in Korea. A lot of them email me or they call me and they say, hey, listen, I'm teaching in Japan, I'm teaching in Taiwan, I'm qualified, I've got a master's degree, help me get this university job. I tell them I can't, not even at my university on a personal recommendation. Why? You're not here in Korea. You're not here face-to-face for the interview. They also know you could hate Korea. They want people who have been here at least a year to know that they're happy living here. It's not always about qualifications. It is about your personality. And if you have a PhD, that's a different story. I'm guessing 95% of the people coming to Korea don't have a PhD. And no matter how qualified they are, they've got to put in their time somewhere. Public school, Hagwon, make those personal connections. Be sure you're happy living in Korea. Don't ever expect to come here and get a good university job straight off the boat or the airplane.
Mm-hmm. Because they want to know if you're willing to stay in this country for a period of time. They don't want a runner. That's very disruptive at a university level especially. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for talking to us today. And I really, is there anything else you want to add before we go?
Oh, no. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope to do another interview with you soon.
I hope so. We actually live just over the mountain from each other here, so it's quite close. So I thank you very much for joining us today. And everyone out there in internet land, if you have any questions you want to fire back at us, please feel free to do so. And you can click on my profile, and get my email address up there on my website. And also, how could they get in contact with you?
Just send me a PM on Dave's ESL Cafe, Bibbidi Bop. You'll see me on the podcast. I'm sure I'll reply to a couple people who have something to say about this. Whether it's good or bad, I'll do my best to be objective about it.
Great. And as we like to do on this podcast, we like to just sit down and rap with teachers and talk about different opportunities and jobs in Korea. If you're someone who's afar out in another land who's curious about teaching in Korea, please send us a letter. Jump on the ESL Cafe. We love to talk about it. We love to help you out. That's how I got here. And I imagine you probably got here as well in a similar fashion. So thank you very much for listening and have a wonderful day. And I encourage you to listen to some of the rest of our stories right here on The Midnight Runner.